City of Waterloo Council meeting, Monday, July 24th, 2017, 2 p.m. Can I have disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Councillor Freeman.
Through Chair Jaworski, I'll declare under new business Delegation 1A and also bylaw item number 17F related to my place of employment.
Yeah. Thank you. And I believe the delegation is no longer coming. They've emailed staff some questions. So yeah.
I'll just declare then on the bylaw.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further declarations? Seeing none, we have a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. Next up is the approval of minutes from previous council meeting. Councillor Henry, Councillor Whaley. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. No reports of committee. Immediately we go into presentations. And today it's a special day. We have the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers. And I'm going to ask Acting Mayor Burke to give us a little overview of who we're going to be honoring today.
And it is our pleasure to take a few moments and honor those who spend their time volunteering. And really, when you think about it, pumping the lifeblood of what runs through this city and almost any other municipality. On behalf of the Governor General of Canada, I am pleased to recognize and congratulate Mr. Douglas Haas as recipient of the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers. The Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers recognizes the exceptional volunteer achievements of Canadians from across the country in a wide range of fields. It's an official national honor and the only one for volunteerism given by the Governor General of Canada. Thousands of deserving Canadians have been honored through these programs, reaching the full diversity of volunteerism in our country. Volunteers lie at the very heart of our communities, and it's only appropriate that their extraordinary contributions be fully recognized. For many decades, musician Douglas Haas has recognized the value of engaging in public volunteer projects, especially through the arts, to help build future creative generations and to galvanize community spirit. By providing the required tools, opportunities, and motivation, he has helped artists realize their full potential. Our commitment to Canada is strengthened when we collectively pay homage to those who distinguish themselves by virtue of their talents, their generosity, and their service to their community and our country. And we are proud to recognize Mr. Haas for his outstanding contributions both to the City of Waterloo and the region. Congratulations, Mr. Haas.
We received this beautiful medal from the Governor General for you. I'd like to offer his congratulations on behalf of the city. Sure. And yeah, here. Oh, that was quick. But wait, there's more. Oh, a pen and also some further information, and also a personal letter from the Governor General as well, as he always does, right? So congratulations, Doug. And if you'd like to say a few words, you'd like to be up, or would you just like to sing us a song or play something on our? I will see you. Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council for presenting this honor to me. I wasn't told that I would be expected to say anything today, and so for the first time in your history, you have someone at this desk who is speechless. Thank you again for this honor, and thank you for including me on your agenda.
Congratulations, Doug. Well, congratulations, Doug, and all the best in all that you've done. Certainly at St. Andrews, I was able to listen to your beautiful music for many decades, and well, a couple of decades anyways, maybe not many, but you know, all the things you've done in for you, yes, that you know, all the things you've done for the community and blessed us with such beautiful music. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have the consent motion with 4 items on it. Somebody want to move that? Councillor Freeman? Councillor Henry? Any discussion on any of these items? All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Item 8A, staff reports. It's the Neighborhood Homes Association Special Services Area Levy Policy. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. I'll just get this started. So just while we're loading this, I wanted to mention that this policy and report is really a collaboration between finance, legal, and legislative services. We're the ones that typically end up processing the requests and carrying them out on an annual basis, and so we've worked on this together and presenting it to council on their behalf. As you know, we have approximately 12 associations in the city that have recreation facilities that were initially covered by covenant. The property owners were required to join the association and pay the fees annually. And in the early 2000s, some of these started expiring, and they have varying timetables of when they expire. And we have, I believe, at least one that doesn't expire. The covenants continue on. So in 2005, the city responded to the concern of these associations by launching a pilot program, funding the services on an ongoing nature through the use of a special area levy or special service levy. Sometimes people refer to it as different things, so we're consolidating it in the policy, calling it a special service area levy. It's permitted under the Act. We can establish this type of levy bylaw when there's a service that's not being offered in the same manner across the municipality, or perhaps not being offered at all in various parts of the municipality. And one of the things I want to mention is that it's contingent on the service actually existing already or being contemplated through the capital budget process. So it's not something that you would typically use for something where an association might approach the city to build a new pool, for example, now that hadn't been contemplated, but if the city had already contemplated building another neighborhood pool, then it could be used. We have 2 in place to date. This information is available in the report, but I just wanted to highlight as well for the presentation that you'll notice that the first that was completed in 2007 did not reach the piloted target of 66% of eligible properties, and it was approved by council with the lower threshold. The second in 2012 would have met the 66% threshold, and you're aware, obviously, recently the Beechwood North results were not approved by council and didn't meet that threshold either. What we have found is that as more covenants are expiring, there's more interest in this tool, and there has been some confusion about what are the requirements of council, because the pilot program requirements have not been consistently applied going forward, or council has exempted some of the requirements. And so we wanted to take everything and put it into a really clear policy so that if associations are considering this, they have a document, they understand what the needs are, what they have to submit, and it provides a greater level of transparency, we think, across the city, and we'll deal with a lot of questions proactively. It largely documents what we have been doing to date, but there are a few things that we've added or clarified. The one is that staff are recommending to council for your consideration that we revert back to the pilot program requirement of 66% of properties would need to support the levy after the vote. We feel that that is important and it's prudent. This should be something that is of last resort. There should be a great deal of interest and support in the neighboring properties to support the ongoing service. And we've supported it through our research by looking at other homes associations that require 66% or even some higher, 75%, to initiate new levies. And it's similar to the requirement when establishing business improvement areas. So if you're establishing a new business improvement area, or if a business improvement area is bringing forward a new levy, 1/3 of the property owners can object to that. So it's based on a similar premise as what we found in our research. So we've suggested that for council's consideration that we reformalize that 66% support. We've also suggested at the application stage
that the 66% support that council has required previously by straw poll come in the form of a petition. Now, how the association collects those names could be by telephone or by email or by door-to-door, but we'd like to see a list, not just a verbal or an email saying, yes, that there is 66% support. We'd like to see that list before we initiate the process, because the vote process does take time, it does take money, and I think it's important on everyone's behalf that that initial support base is sought through a petition first. We've also clarified that the levy can only occur after the covenants have expired. A property owner cannot be required to join an association twice, through a covenant on the property and also through a special area levy. We've also asked that we avoid conducting the votes in an election year for logistical reasons, but also voter fatigue. And we've put in place an application form, so it's a really consistent and clear set of information that's required. And we have a checklist of documents for those that are considering a levy. We've outlined the process of this flow chart, and I won't go through each of the steps, but we're estimating from the time an application is submitted to the time that we are opening ballots, it would take approximately 4 months. We do have to send down information and revise the voters list and give a window for that, and then also give a certain window for voting. And we would be mindful of holiday season and work with the associations around the timing, but it does take a little bit of time. And we've said that you could submit the application 2 years prior to the covenants expiring. With putting the petition in place, if council supports that aspect of the policy, we would reduce one of the staff reports that come to council. As you will recall, to date, what has happened is we've received the straw poll results. We've brought a report to council saying, do you want us to initiate the vote process? We feel if council supports this process through the policy that that step isn't really necessary, and it has just been adding to the length of time that the process takes. So we think that we could skip that step with council's endorsement of the policy. We did send both the draft policy out in advance to the relevant associations, and we also sent the final staff report and policy to collect feedback. And this is some of the feedback that we've received. They were overall happy to know that we're documenting something. They've acknowledged it's been word of mouth before and that has been difficult. They obviously want to have a final copy, and we've committed to that. We've been asked by one of the groups to consider lowering the threshold to 51% of turnout versus 66% of properties. And for the reasons that I've already mentioned, staff really think that the higher threshold is necessary, but that's ultimately a council decision. And we've been asked to make sure that we're being mindful when we're timing votes that it's easier to seek support on a levy around the period of time that people would think of using the facility. So November, December, it's probably not top of mind to use a court or a pool, but we have to be careful, obviously, of vacations and look at, we've been asked to look at alternate voting methods such as emailing in votes. I'm not certain that we would support that, but we could perhaps look at a proxy vote system. We've been asked to consider developing an FAQ that would deal with other items as well, such as what's required on an annual basis to have the budget approved. And one association is really hopeful that this is approved tonight so that they can submit their application in August. So that is the feedback we received, and we're happy to answer questions, and Paul is here as well if there's financial questions.
Thank you very much, Julie. First up is Councillor Whaley.
Well, thank you for your detailed report, Julie. It's pretty interesting stuff. My question relates to the 66%. Is that 66% of residents or 66% of voters?
We are recommending that it would be 66% of the eligible properties to vote. So the higher of the thresholds, which is what the pilot program required in 2005. It was softened for the 2007 vote when it came back to council for consideration. We feel very strongly that this should be used as a last resort mechanism. We're aware of associations that sell associate memberships and have a wait list, and perhaps there's an opportunity for associations to leverage those wait lists. Under the levy, the associate memberships could not be sold. So we're hoping that we can work with associations around self-sustainability rather than the levy process.
If we took the typical municipal vote as an example, where usually 30% of the people vote, they would never ever be granted approval, because there would never ever be a number. Even if we took the national average for voting, which is 60% of the people who vote, if you got 66% of the people who voted on the national level, they still would never ever, you'd never ever have any association that could meet that threshold, would you?
Through the chair to Councillor Whaley, I think that we see a different turnout in this type of vote. I understand your point, but I think that this is different, and this is not dissimilar from other policies we've seen, such as setting up a BIA, because in this case, you are creating a levy, so you're creating a direct financial impact on a property owner that does not exist otherwise.
Well, it would not really not be the case, because no one would ever, based on all the voting that there ever is, unless it's like in Australia where you have to vote or you go to jail, no association could ever pass the threshold. Take a look at the numbers.
Through the chair to Councillor Whaley, I mean, this is our recommendation. We believe that associations should be trying to reach the higher threshold and encouraging people and communicating to them that a absentee vote is a no vote, similar to around the chambers. An abstained vote is a no vote. And we think that if we are approaching the levy from the perspective that this is a viable community service to the neighborhood and that we agree that it is worth saving and that the community uses it and deems it as important and viable, then they should be prepared to vote in support of sustaining it. And if they are not supporting sustaining it, then that should raise another question. And that's our recommendation. But ultimately, it's a council decision, and we're willing to obviously implement whatever council chooses, but that is the rationale and the point that we've taken. So I just wanted you to understand that.
I know how hard you worked on this, how diligent you've been. I appreciate your efforts. We have a slight disagreement on how we're ever going to have anybody be successful in this, and hopefully I'll have a chance to talk about that when we get to the vote.
Well, just for my confirmation, I think so the 2012 results that we have on the screen here today, 169 cast, 209 properties, that works out to nearly 81% turnout. Is that correct?
Yes, certainly we've had a much higher turnout in our levy votes than the municipal election.
So I think that there's, it's proof in the most recent one that we actually did achieve over 80% turnout in one of them.
Yeah, through the chair in 2013, sorry, it was 80.86% turnout. And in 2007, which was the first one, it was 69.8%.
Thank you. Further questions? Somebody want to move this? Councillor Henry, please. And the seconder?
Mayor, happy to move the motion with an amendment. The amendment is to recommendation 2, which asks for the policy approval, and that's to point 15 and 16 in the policy, which council will find on page 53 of the packet. And that's to change wording around 2/3 of, it says 66%, but I think it should say 2/3 of properties cast, properties to votes cast. And I'll articulate why in debate if I get a seconder, which probably should be Councillor Whaley.
Okay.
Rather than percentage of properties, percentage of votes cast.
Okay, so go ahead and explain, Councillor.
So I think that decisions are made by the people that show up. I think voting matters. And so that's principle 1. So I think it should be about votes, because votes should matter. And the second principle on this is that this is an extraordinary rather than a normal kind of process, and that's why 2/3 rather than 50% plus 1 should make sense in these cases. That's also consistent with the standard that councils have applied in past cases where they've accepted and rejected levies. It's been a 2/3 of votes cast standard. I appreciate the Deputy Clerk's parallel argument about business improvement area processes where 1/3 of business owners can object and block a BIA levy from forming. If 1/3 of property owners chose to vote to block, they would win under the Deputy Clerk's proposed system and my proposed system. So we don't at all diverge from the standard that is set by the BIA by changing it to votes cast rather than total properties. So we still adhere to the principle and consistency of the BIA that the clerk mentions, and we're consistent with past council's actions and with the principles I espouse that votes matter and that this is an extraordinary rather than a normal motion.
So I have a question of clarification before I get to Councillor Whaley. One thing about the 66% of properties, it mandates a minimum turnout of 66%. What would be the turnout required without reading?
I'm not suggesting one overtly. The policy speaks to when something would come back to council. So I've heard objections in the past from folks that, as we heard in this chamber, what if only 3 people vote and 2 people can make me do this? Well, I don't think that's likely. The turnout history is quite clear that this has an animated and interested community involved when this happens. And 2, I think if council saw that, council wouldn't be that keen. The policy simply suggests when council would be able to consider one of these. And I don't want to get into a back and forth numbers game of exact thresholds. I think that voting matters and people have a tendency to show up here.
And the one further clarification, step 1, which is you need 66% of people to sign a petition, that would still stand.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. That's also being consistent, I think, with where we've been trying to go. And you can do that over a long period of time rather than, say, over a 30-day window of voting, and it's a lot easier to do. We had some cases in Beechwood North, most recently, where folks were suggesting, well, I was in Florida, so I couldn't vote. I think votes cast is and clerks has a good process to handle this, but if we try to replicate a petition which could take a long period of time over a short voting period of time, we'll get lots of weird and wonderful requests to try to make sure that that everybody gets all of their chances to do some of that. That's why I think the voting matters standard, which we're very used to in terms of running elections, is the right one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whaley up next.
Further to that, I don't know why people in a democracy don't vote, but oftentimes they don't. And they disenfranchise themselves. And if they choose not to vote on important issues in their community, their neighborhood, or their country, that's their right to do so, but they have to live with the consequences.
Thank you, Councillor Whaley. Further questions? Do I see any here? So is everybody familiar with the change that has been made? Is there any wording that we need to encapsulate? And what page are we on, Councillor Henry?
53 is points 15 and 16.
Okay, so the changes are to points 15 and 16 solely.
And I'm happy for clerks after the meeting to massage it to make sure it's all grammatical.
Correct. Further discussion? Councillor Durrell,
just
please.
for clarification then, and this might be for Julie. So per property, it's there could be up to 4 or 5 people in a house. It's just regular voting rules.
So through the
Votes
chair
cast.
to Councillor Durrell, yes, so it's one ballot is submitted per property. So regardless of the owners, yes. And when they submit the ballot, they're submitting it on behalf of all. If one person submits it, it's on behalf of all the owners.
But it could count 4 times as, okay, not votes cast is per property. Got it.
Further clarifications? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. That's unanimous. Thank you very much for the work, Julie. I think policies and procedures really help show the way for our citizens in determining how to make best use of their facilities, and some may choose to and some may not choose to. But that's, I think, where we're applying extra taxation on people, it's incumbent that we have great turnout. So thank you very much for the work on this. Next up, Item B, longer stay paid parking honk mobile agreement. Welcome, Christine.
Good afternoon, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. Before I start tonight, this afternoon, I usually come in the evening. I'd like to say that bringing this option before council today was the work of a collaborative project team. Staff members from municipal enforcement, the CAO's office, legislative services, and legal services have all worked, and I'd like to recognize their contributions toward this project. The Uptown Waterloo Business Improvement Area and Waterloo City Council have asked for a longer stay paid parking option in Uptown Waterloo, specifically a parking option that would suit Waterloo's unique provision of 2-hour no-charge parking while allowing patrons to pay for additional parking time beyond that 2 hours. Previously, staff have considered numerous options, including pay and display machines, gated systems, and the integration with the license plate recognition enforcement system. Because of concerns about controlled access, implementation costs, and limitations to using the license plate recognition vehicle in a revenue-generating system, staff have identified a more cost-effective option. And that option is Honk Mobile. Honk Mobile is a free app that users can download from the App Store, Google Play, or use through a web browser. It allows patrons to purchase additional parking time with a few clicks of their smartphone. Using this technology is a good fit with Waterloo's reputation as a smart city and will allow us to provide an improved level of customer service. Honk Mobile is being adopted by other municipalities in Ontario and already has a strong local presence operating lots at Conestoga College and Wilfrid Laurier University. This is a tool that our patrons will be able to use to extend their parking time and enjoy more of what Uptown Waterloo has to offer. How does it work? First, users create an account. To do this, they need only 4 pieces of information: their email address, a cell phone number, their license plate number, and payment information. After a patron parks, they enter their parking zone and purchase any additional parking time beyond the first 2 hours that are provided at no charge. Patrons can also purchase additional parking time at any time during their visit to Uptown Waterloo. Enforcement practices to the time-regulated no-charge parking will remain the same. If a patron chooses to purchase additional parking time through the Honk Mobile app, that purchase will be tied to their license plate number. Their license plate number and the amount of additional parking time purchased will be communicated to municipal enforcement officers on their existing smartphone. Officers will use that information to determine whether or not a vehicle is parking compliant. For consistency, ease of use, and for municipal enforcement efficiency, the regulations in all parking lots where Honk Mobile will be offered need to be the same. For that reason, parking lots with temporary 3-hour no-charge parking will be reset to 2-hour no-charge parking. Parking after 5 p.m. on weekdays and all day on Saturday and Sundays will remain available at no charge without time restriction. The hourly parking cost to the user will be $2.75. The City of Waterloo will pay $750 a month to Honk Mobile as part of their software as a service model, and credit card transaction processing fees will be deducted from the revenue that's remitted to the city. New signs will need to be installed in all of the city's parking lot, including the Honk Mobile option. To allow time for purchase and installation of these signs, the launch date of the program will be Friday, September the 1st. In summary, Honk Mobile is a user-friendly option that will provide more options for our parking patrons. It's a low-cost tool that will allow patrons to purchase additional parking time, extend their stay, and enjoy more of what Uptown Waterloo has to offer. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Christine. First up for questions, I saw Councillor Durrell, Councillor Whaley, Councillor Freeman.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions. This is a Canadian tech company. They were on Dragon's Den?
Yes, they were on Dragon's Den. You're correct.
Yeah, so Canadian technology, which is great. One of the things I was curious about in the report, you talk about the communities that are using it and some of our local educational organizations that are, but you didn't tell us what they think of it. What kind of feedback did you get from these cities and the college and university on how well it works?
It's a relatively new technology. We haven't heard any negative feedback from anybody who's been using it. And the municipality of London, I believe our municipal enforcement staff visited with London as a learning experience for how they can use it moving forward.
I did notice they have a 3.7 out of 5 stars on their Android, so there's maybe some things we can dig into how people have reviewed it. The other question is, I think since I've been sitting in this chair as the Uptown Councillor, the businesses in Uptown have been begging for this, so thank you. But how do we? There's a little about communications. We're going to put signs up, but I'm very interested in what is the communication strategy on how we're going to let the 550,000 people in this area know that they can do this in Uptown, and I guess that's what I'd like to know.
So city staff have been working with the city's communications team, and we've put together a communication plan that will include social media, information in the Uptown Waterloo Business Improvement Area's newsletter, information in city news, digital screen ads at city facilities, and a press release that will be issued following council today.
There'll be a story in the Chronicle on Wednesday.
A little push. There we go. Good one. Next up is Councillor Whaley, then Councillor Freeman.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Tutman. With respect to the fiscal aspect of this whole program, is it the intention for this city to have to spend money on this, or will it be cost neutral, or do we expect to actually have some revenue from honk?
It's difficult to predict how many people will choose to use this tool. So for the first year, city staff have estimated that revenue will range between $10,000 and $20,000. So the city will make a little bit of money, but the intention of this program is to offer more options and increase our level of customer service with minimal cost outlay to the city.
So you said the potential for a cash positive after year one?
Yes.
And you'll report back after that year? The intention is to report back after this trial? Is it a trial, or we buy on to honk now and we're stuck with it?
The intention is that we would continue to move forward with Honk Mobile, but after the first initial year term, we would renegotiate the $750 monthly fee based on the revenues that we see from the first year.
Thank you, Christine.
Next up, Councillor Freeman.
Through Mayor Jaworski, I have used Honk, and it's also used at Conrad Grable College. The challenge I had was that as a BlackBerry user, I didn't understand how to access it through the app on my web browser. So I think that there'll be, as part of the communication, we really need to help people understand that. If you have an Android-based BlackBerry, it's no problem. But when you don't have an Android-based BlackBerry, you have to go. There's no app in BlackBerry world. So it's not a BlackBerry app. You have to use the browser, and I think we just need to help people to understand that. I tried, and I didn't know that until I read your report, honestly. And then the other piece is I know that we had said the reasons why we didn't allow overnight parking was for snow clearing, but with this application in place, it would seem to me that in the wintertime, people, especially around Christmas, they may choose to park their vehicle overnight. And will that be permitted now?
The intention of this app isn't to allow overnight parking. We still do maintenance is completed year-round on our parking lots in the evenings. And there has also been an expectation in the past that lots in our Uptown will not be a source of parking for residential buildings in the Uptown, and that those buildings will provide the parking necessary on their own site. People are still allowed to register for their 15 exemptions and use those in the designated parking lots in the Uptown.
I think that that's going to have to be really communicated well, because I can imagine that most folks would think they could just pay and play.
We can work both of those items, both of the web browser and the overnight parking, into our communication plan.
And then I had some questions. One was, again, about the overnight parking, that I think there's probably for next time around, to think about overnight parking, allow people instead of just, although they're able to register for free parking, honestly, I think people would just as soon use the app they're familiar with and pay $5 and be able to park overnight at certain lots that we allow it in, and maybe that should be considered for future. I noticed there was all-day options in the parkade, but no all-day options for any of the new lots. And is there a reason that we would not allow like all-day parking in for a certain amount of money in other lots as well?
Certainly. So the intention of Honk Mobile isn't to allow patrons to park all day. It's for patrons to extend a shorter stay. We still want to encourage parking turnover in the Uptown in order to support our businesses. If a patron needs all-day parking for a one-time visit, we would encourage them to use the paid parking on the first floor of the Uptown Waterloo Parkade, or if they need daily parking on an ongoing basis, we would encourage them to purchase a monthly permit.
Okay, and I'm not familiar with the issues of all-day parking. I just saw that was an option for one of them. And then finally I saw that some of the lots currently are till 6 p.m. and we've rationalized all back to 5 p.m. as the sort of the parking time frame. Is there a particular reason for that we chose 5 p.m. over 6 p.m.?
We've done that in order to be consistent with our neighboring municipality, Kitchener.
Excellent. Okay. No, that's good. Thank you. Further questions? Somebody want to move it?
I'll move it.
Seconded by Councillor Veith.
Yay. This is wonderful.
Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Yes. And I'm glad this, happened. And Christine and I were discussing this on Friday, that this will now give a 10-fold increase to the amount of longer stay parking we have in Uptown Waterloo. It's simply enormous.
And on behalf of the Uptown businesses, this is huge. So thank you very much. This is going to make a big difference.
Wonderful work. Thank you for this, and thanks to the entire team who worked on it. I know there's a lot of other people as well. Thanks, Christine. And for the record, I installed the app yesterday to try it out, and it took like 4 minutes to install it and get it all set up, so it works very well. Yes. Item C. It's 2017 Q2 surplus projection with Mr. Paul Hatinga. And do you have a presentation, or is this for information, question, Q&A only?
If it pleases Council, I can just say a few words and open the floor to Council. So just in a nutshell, this is our midterm surplus projection report that we bring every year. We're looking at about a small surplus on the tax side of just under $400,000 due to many of the similar items as previous years, but most notably supplementary taxes, penalties and interest on taxes, and adjustments to taxes are the three big areas that we'll be watching very closely through the rest of the year to ensure that they're continue to track on projection. On the enterprise side and other items, we're looking at some fairly significant amounts being contributed to the reserves in excess of budget, which is a good news story as well. The areas there are interest revenues, Water North Hydro revenue, and our step gapping and vacancy gapping that goes to the reserves automatically as well. So we're tracking well. We'll be bringing back, the next report will come in November, and at that point we'll have a much clearer picture given 11 months down the road.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Questions from Council? I have a question. In terms of the $400,000 surplus, that's of the overall budget, not just of the tax-based budget. So we're really talking.
Yeah, that's it's based on the tax-only items, but that in essence is what's available to be contributed to, additional amounts that will be contributed to the reserves in excess of the amounts that will be contributed for specific reserves for the enterprises and other items.
So quick math shows it's about 0.5% surplus, simply.
Yeah, it's okay. A small percentage, yes.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, it was for information only. Thank you very much, Paul. Next up, the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program, report prepared by Cassandra, who is here. Welcome, Cassandra. Now, this is just for questions? Okay, Anybody have questions? Councillor Freeman, go figure. Or you want to move it?
I was just going to move it, but thank you.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Henry. Questions, Councillor Durrell, or you're voting already?
A comment. One of the things that I really like to see were the spots that fill up my Blackberry so often, which was the spur line on Regina, and there was a couple Weber at the. So it's nice to see that not only that how collaborative our organization is, where you're hearing from Active Transportation that these are issues, and then you're putting it into action with grants that can actually make those spaces better. So I'm happy to see that. I was particularly interested in a bridge. Where did I see that? Did I make that up? 2018 Albert Street pedestrian bridge, part of the Waterloo. Is it
Page 96.
Yes, 96. Is it appropriate to ask questions about that?
You can.
I want to hear a little bit about that.
Let's see if Ron's here or
Is it
Phil?
Phil?
Phil's at the back. Do you know anything about
Yeah.
that bridge, Phil?
Details in on this, but
Yeah.
when
Good
you see great stuff, you want to know more about it,
Good
right?
opportunity to learn. Welcome, Phil.
Good afternoon, thanks.
Phil, who spelled all weekend parking bikes at the Jazz Fest, I just might add, so thank you.
Okay. Yes, the Albert Street Bridge, there is a multi-use path on Albert Street that connects into another path that goes through Albert McCormick and up onto Parkside Drive. Over on Albert is falling apart, so this bridge is actually to make that connection. So that's what it's about.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? That would be all of us. Thank you for your continued work on repatriating money to Waterloo. Cassandra. E, Cemetery Services Bylaw and new section price list updates. We have a report prepared by Bryce Krause. Welcome, Bryce. And I don't, do you have any comments or anything, or just open waiting for questions, Q&A?
I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, it was an extensive report of nearly, it seemed like 100 pages. Questions in there? Were there any questions? Certainly extensive. Councillor Whaley.
Well, it was a detailed report on a sunny July weekend. Thanks for that. I was interested to get an understanding about how these new rates compare to the cost of living. Generally, you don't have to be specific, but how are they keeping up with the cost of living? Are they more than the cost of living for Ontario?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, Councillor.
Or should I say cost of dying?
Yes, you could say that. These are new development plots. When we come in November and December and bring our price adjustments for the greater cemetery services and lots, and that's kind of when we kind of pay a lot more attention to the cost of living and keeping in tune. These rates now and these prices that we've identified for these new features reflect more of what the kind of the intrinsic land value was, and we established there, and what our cost of the development that happened with putting all these new features and new sections in place, and that. So the cost of living is more of when we establish the overall cemetery adjustment prices in the winter. Okay, you're welcome.
Further questions for Bryce? Seeing none, would somebody care to move that? Councillor Veith, Councillor Freeman, all those in favor? It's all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Bryce. And just think, Councillor Whaley, somebody actually had to write that report. Never mind, just read it. So, next up is item F. Request for relief from development charges, Maxwell Building Consultants. We have a report here prepared by Michael. Welcome. Do you have any words to say, or just here for Q&A? Q&A. Questions at this time on any of the options that we have? Councillor Durrell.
Would it be better for council if I put one of the recommendations on the floor so we can discuss it, or how do you want to do this?
You have the floor. Let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking to go with number 2, 75%.
Okay, I know that, but is there questions that you had on that? Because I know I saw Councillor Whaley had his hand up about moving it, so, but, yeah. Yeah, well, okay, so let's put it on the floor. I know Councillor Whaley had his hand up too, so it's
I'll
in his
second it
ward.
with a comment when appropriate.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Whaley, seconded by Councillor Durrell. I know they're both excited about it. Who wants to talk about it? Councillor Whaley?
Maybe we both do, I don't know.
Okay, well, this is exciting.
So
We're moving forward quickly.
75% of the units are in this development are planned to be affordable housing, so it makes sense for us to mirror that by having this, this credit be 75%. And so that's option 2, as Councillor Durrell has said. That means the city's contribution is $101,250,000 for affordable housing in and for Waterloo. But I'd also like to further direct staff within this motion, even though it's not part of the motion, we need to come up with a policy, because we've been one-offing these for years, and it would be great to have some policy guidelines to give some direction for the next time we see an affordable housing proposal come forward, that we have some background and guidelines and a considered and thoughtful staff opinion on it before we do another one-off. So my request is 75% because that mirrors the amount of apartments that are going to be available in this unit, but also that we have a policy coming forward when staff can jam it in their busy schedule.
Thank you, Councillor Whaley. Councillor Durrell, anything? No.
Yeah, my thinking is along the same lines. I think it's important when we look around Uptown Waterloo or around Waterloo in general, we're not seeing a lot of private developers coming forward with affordable housing. It's been grassroots, it's being done through the region, and so I think that there's this developer's taking a leadership role in this, and I believe that if we're going to see other developers following suit, that we need to be working in collaboration with them to say, yes, we will help you along. And I think that this is 75% makes sense. As Councillor Whaley pointed out, it mirrors the development. And I hope that there's other developers looking and watching at this. And we know that we are way underserviced in this space, and so it would be nice to see that you don't have to build an entire building, 75% of the building, or 50% of the building, whatever it looks like. But let's start doing things differently when we're bringing forward buildings to Waterloo.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Burke, please.
Just along those lines, because it's so easy a lot of times to say nobody's doing anything about affordable housing, and what's the government doing, and what's the private sector doing. And here's an example of collaboration where we really are, putting money where mouths are. And it's encouraging to see that, because it's not going to be solved by one sector at any time. And by actually stepping forward and doing this, maybe we do encourage some more people to step forward and say, look, we've got a property we can work with. Will you work with us? So getting a wide-ranging policy in place, as Councillor Willey suggests, is a great idea to continue the development of this, because I'm still a great believer that no one's going to step in with a magic bullet anytime soon. And working together and pulling this together in this kind of collaboration is the only way to move these problems along. And I think a lot of us are tired of seeing them. Let's see if we can start to fix some things.
Further comments? I think that, if we look at this 75% of the 28 units there, that means we're providing or helping, doing a little bit of our part, helping to provide 20 new homes for people in Waterloo for $101,000. And I think that's a really important way to look at it. Where a little bit of investment will help go a long way. And that's the 25% that are at market. They're actually helping this program, this project along. So I think it's a wonderful way to move forward in Waterloo, and without this we wouldn't have a project here this year. But I would say that this will probably be the largest investment in the 4-year term of council in affordable housing. So well done. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. And thank you, Michael. Next up, item G, Heritage Permit Application HP 17-03 for 47 Spring Street West. A report prepared by Michelle Lee. You're here for Q&A or for Q&A? Questions from the Horseshoe? Councillor Veith.
Thank you, Michelle, for being here and for the report. I received a couple phone calls about this, and I just wondered, this is in a heritage district. There's strict rules about how homes can be modified, and this is a big thing to sever a lot in this neighborhood. First off, can you talk about some of it? Went to Committee of Adjustment, and apparently there was a lot of concessions given on both the severed piece and the lot that was retained, the other piece. So I don't know, I'm a little concerned that there was so much sort of given away to the new piece. Can you talk a bit about that?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So you're right, there was a Committee of Adjustment application that came forward. It was deferred. The decision on that application was deferred to allow for a heritage permit, a heritage impact assessment to be conducted. And so what that impact assessment did is it looked at all of the policies that we have in the district to guide issues related to this and to guide new development, and it compared that to what was being proposed. And what we've learned is that the Heritage Conservation District Plan doesn't offer a whole lot of guidance with respect to severances, and what guidance it did provide, this particular severance application didn't have an impact on those features that were being conserved through the policies. As a result, the Heritage Committee and staff supported the recommendations for the severance. In terms of the minor variances that you're referring to, the many concessions, the Heritage Conservation District Plan actually does specifically make provisions or at least enable the city to consider variances where new construction or additions might be more sympathetic to the surrounding district if the setbacks and that kind of thing are aligned with what's nearby. And so rather than requiring a standard very deep setback, which you would find in more modern subdivisions, the variance applications were seeking consistency with the surrounding neighborhood. And so that was also supported by the Heritage Impact Assessment and then therefore by staff and the Municipal Heritage Committee. That was a Committee of Adjustment decision that's sort of come and gone now. The neighborhood and others had an opportunity to appeal that decision, and that appeal period is over. And so now what we have in front of Council today is an application to build on that newly severed lot. And this report reviews specifically, it doesn't re-review the severance application. What it does is it looks at the new construction and determines is it appropriate based on the policies in the Heritage Conservation District Plan.
Okay, thank you. So are there some tweaks that can be made or some, like, not to this one, but going forward with within the Heritage District on severances and such?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I am working with our planning approval staff in the development of the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. And we're exploring options. First of all, we're looking at what the potential precedents might be set for severances in the district, and looking at what the zoning that's proposed for this area will do in terms of enabling or not enabling severances. So it is something that we're aware of and looking at.
I think, I think if I look at it, it's a very, very unusual lot, and essentially the severed part faces Albert Street, and I think if I read correctly in the report, there was actually a house on that, what is now, quote, the severed lot. There was a house on it for 30 or 40 years or something like that. Yeah, so, you know, I think it's also important to note that our Committee of Adjustment is a committee of citizens. Our Heritage Committee is a committee of citizens, and it's so citizens helping us, you know, interpret the rules that we set. And I think that that's an important thing here today. And then we see the great, thank you very much for the pictures of the house and stuff like that. We can see it's very modest and seems to be in character, just from a layman's terms. Further questions? Seeing none, anybody want to move that? Councillor Durrell?
Yeah.
Councillor Burke? All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle, and thanks to the Heritage Committee as well for their work on this file. Next up, we're going high-tech again with smart city stuff. The Advanced Metering Infrastructure Pilot Summary prepared by Todd Chapman. Welcome, Todd.
There we go. Thanks, Mayor Jarowski, and good afternoon, members of council as well. Today I'll be talking about the Advanced Meter Infrastructure Pilot Project and highlighting some of the key findings from the report, as well as answering any questions about the technology of the report at the end. As you may recall, the pilot project started in September 2015, and it was really a chance for us to get our feet wet with an AMI system and explore the technology firsthand. So we primarily included residential customers in the pilot project, so just over 100, as well as we ended up having about 15 non-residential customers, so that's commercial industrial properties. Some of the key objectives of the pilot project was to first assess the performance of the AMI system, so how did it collect reads, were we getting the results that we expected to get and hear from several sales representatives. Secondly, what's the impact on the level of customer service? What's the impact on administrative and operational duties? So more internally, how does that impact water services and revenue services? And lastly, we want to provide a high-level financial overview to kind of give a sense of what would a citywide implementation cost. So just as a bit of a refresher, this diagram kind of depicts an advanced metering system. For the purposes of the pilot project, as you recall and as you'll note in the report, I'll start with the center tower there, the wireless communication infrastructure. So this is where we partnered with Waterloo North Hydro and utilized their fixed base system, which they use for their smart electric system. And how the system essentially works is, if you look on the left-hand side where the residential home is, we equip that home with a transmitter that sends that signal through that wireless tower or communication platform to a database environment, which in this case was also hosted by Waterloo North Hydro. So once that transmitter signaled, and for the purposes of the pilot, it was an hourly read that we set up and configured so that every hour that transmitter's sending how much water consumption has occurred at that property. So that's essentially how that AMI system works. To give you a sense of what it really looks like out in the field, this is a typical residential installation. In the blue circle, the little white box there, that's the transmitter that we fasten to the outside of the house that is getting the signal from the water meter, typically in someone's basement. So the report touches on impact on customer service, and that's a big focus of the pilot. That's what we wanted to assess. Again, there's near live hourly water reads that are coming in, and so how does that kind of transform how we respond to customer complaints and customer issues? One of the first immediate impacts is that our customers have access to their own data. They have access to their water consumption and usage patterns. Secondly, we can now detect essentially live when something abnormal is happening on a property. So in particular, high consumption cases. So I know the report speaks to that, but that is one of the most powerful tools that the AMI system offers, is the ability to detect these situations and respond or contact that customer immediately before it grows into something that's pretty disastrous for them and tough to deal with as well from the city side. One of the other aspects which kind of came up late but included in the report was just revenue services and water services have talked about a customer portal for both water and tax information and some other functionality that could be offered to customers. Through the pilot, it was kind of discussed that, you know, maybe this is an opportunity to combine the two websites into one customer portal, so that if that customer portal is developed, we would like to embed this advanced metering information should we eventually go citywide with the technology. So the report also talks about some administrative impacts on our revenue and water services staff. I don't want to talk about everything that I've listed here. The report does that. I think the main takeaway is that the system offers a lot of efficiencies and in some cases automation of some of these duties, so that again, the nature of having that information at your fingertips through a computer software is going to have a profound impact on how some of these duties are carried out. Moving on to the operation side of things, again, there were some efficiencies that were listed in the report. I won't talk about every one of them, but one of the big ones was just the meter chamber or meter pit entries. Currently, we need to send sometimes 2 or 3 field staff to a property once a month because it's a confined space entry. Our current meter reading contractor does not offer that service, and it's one of those cases where you put a transmitter on, you get that read automatically. It eliminates that need to do that. As well as some properties under construction, difficult to access meters. All of these situations occur maybe a little bit more than you'd think, and the AMI system offers a lot of advantages to address those duties. The report also mentions, you know, in introducing this, you know, 30,000, if it were to be citywide implementation, introducing new infrastructure does take responsibilities and add responsibilities to staff as well. So there is that added level of responsibilities that both field staff and administrative staff would need to adhere to. So lastly, I'll just summarize the conclusions from the report and the pilot project. Staff felt that the AMI proved to be a reliable and stable technology. We were very comfortable with the performance and the percentage of reads that were coming through the system. We felt that it'd be a significant enhancement to our ability to provide customer service to people in Waterloo, to property owners in Waterloo. There are certainly administrative and operational advantages to having an AMI system or access to an AMI system. As mentioned, introducing 30,000 plus devices will require support. When we get Section 6 talks about the high-level financial analysis, so you know, at this time we noticed, you know, we feel like there would be a moderate return on investment. However, that kind of leads into one of the key staff recommendations, which is we're requesting to further examine the financial side of implementing a citywide AMI system, as well as determining the recommended implementation schedule, I would say. And that report would come back to council either later this year or early next year. So, and that's the summary of the report. I'd like to answer any questions you guys may have.
Excellent. So far I have Councillor Henry, Whaley, and Veith on the list. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and certainly thank you, Todd, for the report, and to the broad staff team that's been working on this pilot. I remember when the Laurier MBA students came in and talked about what they thought would be a fairly robust ROI, and that we, I think, very prudently wanted to double check the math and ground test this to see what the actual costs were. And I see here moderate ROI, and based on the financial impact I see in the report, it feels like a very moderate ROI that may bleed further through more detailed analysis. So what we ultimately have before us is a higher level of service for probably a higher level of cost. So the question I was wondering, thing I was wondering about, as if council approves this direction, is as part of your next detailed analysis, is staff thinking about taking that and those numbers back to the customers that we've had on this pilot program and running the ROI back with them? I certainly saw comments in the report that suggested people are reserving judgment on whether they'd recommend council go ahead with this until they see the dollars attached to the service.
Okay. Through Mayor Jaworski. Councillor Henry, we did have a pretty large survey that we sent out to the participants. I think we purposely did not include asking them their opinion on the financials of the system. I would say that when you mentioned the Wilfrid Laurier team of students, I would say that one of the items that maybe got away from what the true return on investment would be is that they started to factor in capturing water loss through the AMI system. And I think that was a little bit of a misleading endeavor that they chose to take, something that they had read about on their own and researched, and that's great, but I don't think it's going to apply in Waterloo. Getting back to, I don't know if we may, perhaps at the next report, if council approves that, we could circle back with those participants. Certainly we have their contact information and could see if they support that.
I certainly think there's value in asking people who have the most experience with the system. We normally don't have that opportunity when we think about budgeting and levels of service to show people what they'd be paying for before we'd actually commit them to paying for it. We actually have a group here where we could do something I think rather novel and different for us in terms of public engagement on a service level change.
Through Mayor Jaworski, if I could just add one more thing. I'm pretty confident from the participants' perspective that one of the big advantages they see is staving off high consumption bills, which we certainly get our fair share of. And I think that's, in fairness to them, I think they probably view that as it's maybe you pay some, but it's also insurance of not having that significantly high water bill. So, yeah.
Next up, Councillor Whaley v. Burke.
Todd, when I started in this business, the only way you could reach a councillor was to get him on the landline or bump into him in the grocery store. The landline, because there wasn't any other way to communicate. And I think the first 6 months into our business, we heard of a whiz-bang new, revolutionary new communication tool, the pager. And since then, life has changed remarkably for all of us. My one and only question to you is the mission to purchase these 30,000 meters?
So through Mayor Jaworski, I think at this point staff have recognized the benefits of the system. We certainly see the advantages both operationally and administratively of an AMI system. We potentially have a great partner in Waterloo Hydro to piggyback off their system and a system that can handle the capacity of 30,000 plus water meters. So I think the intent was to report on the benefits of the AMI system, but also seek council approval to go ahead and dive into the financials with great detail to come back and be able to share those numbers with council to ultimately approve a citywide implementation. So certainly we think the technology has great advantages to both customers and ourselves, but again, the final numbers and approval would be council's decision at that later date. That answers that. Yeah.
Thank you, Todd. Next up, Councillor Viethen Burke.
Thank you, Todd. Just a couple things. So I just want to make sure, or just clarify, this is so if I go out of my house, leave my washing machine running, and something happens and it blows up and there's water, I come home and there's water all over the floor. Is that the kind of information that people are going to get? like, right up to date?
Yeah, so through Mayor Jarowski, Councillor Veith, so the pilot, the way it was set up in reality was we would receive all of the reads the next morning, and they would be loaded in our system at 6 a.m. in the morning. However, we were only going to go so far with the pilot in terms of how much we would configure, so it would be much more up to date than that. Would a citywide implementation be adopted? So there is the ability to have it live in the sense that every hour we get a read that is in the database, and that is captured by the system, and then it could be set up to notify customers of abnormal consumption such as that. So I don't think it would be as, you know, if your washing machine hose split and it's leaking water, it's not going to be within 15 minutes, but it's going to be pretty close. In particular, if you're out of your property or out of your residence for a number of days, that's when.
So it's more to detect infrastructure in issues.
Yeah, I'll try and give I guess the report speaks to there's two case examples I believe I gave in the report, and one of them was just a very typical customer who went down to Florida every year for several months, and he actually was quite diligent in how he shut off his water and had a neighbor check his property. But he actually logged into the site down in Florida and noticed that there was approximately 3 cubic meters of water going through registering. So he called his neighbor, and his shutoff was not functioning properly down in the basement. So that kind of thing, which can stave off, if you can imagine, if they were gone for 4 months, what that would look like on their next bill.
So in the long term, when everybody is, if all the houses are on this, would there be insurance impacts down the road?
Through Mayor Jarowski, I don't think I can speak to that right now. All I can say is I know there's other private solutions that are being offered for leak detection in basements. We've looked at some of those, but typically those solutions don't also handle billing as this AMI system would. So it's not quite as refined as some of those private solutions you can purchase. So I don't think that there's going to be a significant impact on home insurance through this AMI system.
Yeah, I just wonder, and this is not a question, whether people might think this is too Big Brother-ish, that, you know, the city knows when you have your water turned on and off and if you're home or not.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Burke, you've already answered his question, so I'll speak as a pilot user. I can name 2 instances where it was helpful in our home. One was I knew the toilet in the basement was leaking, turned it off, and but we had a whole bunch of, well, kids were coming over for the weekend, and so I turned it back on, and I can tell you that I think the water meter system informed me, because then the leak was bigger, and I can tell you a running toilet, or just a little bit flap on there, running toilet used a lot of water, and so that was one thing. And then second was I decided, since every now and then in the hot summer my yard dies, and sometimes let it go drought, and sometimes it's or let it go dormant, and this year I decided, or last year I decided not to. This year I don't have to worry about it, but it's never water your lawn, I can tell you that. It can 7,000 liters in 24 hours, and so I got a warning for that. So sure got a warning from everybody anyway. So you know, it's just amazing how much water can flow out of sprinklers and stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't 7,000 liters, certainly thousands. Just so, and as a pilot user, I think my only complaint that I expressed was the fact the application seemed a little bit rudimentary. I certainly wouldn't get 3.7 out of 5 stars, but then I learned through Todd that it actually was just being built. I thought it was actually professional application. This was being built as part of the pilot.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct, Mayor Jarowski. And that's something I guess we considered. There was only so far we were going to invest in the pilot project. We just wanted to get up to a point where it's giving us the basic functionality both to staff and to our customers. And
yeah, and I think it was, you know, as it continued to improve through the particularly the beginning of the pilot, it certainly was very useful. I did have a couple questions. If I look at page 220, which talks about the number of estimates, so from January, February, March, and April of this year, we actually had to do over 2,000 estimates for water meter reads. So there would be a lot of I'm not saying a lot of, but there's substantial manual labor in calculating the missing reads, I would think, that would then be not required through an AMI system, fully implemented.
That's correct, Mayor Jarowski. So, yeah, and that's listed in the administrative impact section, and several of those duties do require staff time. Some of those can be generated automatically through our billing system, but many cannot, and it's always a difficult troubleshooting case where we have to then talk to our meter reading contractor right now, figure out what happened, notify the customer often sometimes, because what can happen is a series of estimates can lead to an abnormal bill as well. So if you have that too much, it can lead to a problem with our customers. So yes, the AMI system is a great tool to help out in that area.
And for new buildings that are being put up, could this be mandatory? Could this be in all new houses that are being put up, or that's not something we can mandate?
So I think through the next report, we talk about having an implementation schedule, and I think that's one of the details that can be included in that report. Certainly I understand the concept where as new meters are installed, if we went to a citywide implementation, we would then also equip the house with a transmitter. So that would be a very likely scenario, but I don't want to talk about that too far in advance.
Thanks. And then finally, on page 237, I had the comments from the users, which are all great to read, but the first one, the AMI web application has been a godsend, and it goes to describe how a multi-residential situation, they discovered 2 leaking toilets that were using all kinds of water and cost them a lot of money. Is there an opportunity here to prioritize like multi-residential, or is there a service revenue opportunity for us in terms of consulting with them to put in the system and to then help them? Or that would be for, again, next phase?
So, Mayor Jarowski, one of the recommendations was to at least approve the continuation of some installations on a limited scale, which Water North Hydro is completely fine with. And I think some of the multi-res issues that we have are access actually to the meter, because they don't always have a remote area that we can go to. So that is one of the areas that we can address if should council approve recommendation 3.
Thank you.
So they would be given priority in a sense in that way. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Whaley.
So with respect to the recommendation themselves, number 3 asks council to approve the continuation of AMI installations on a limited scale, approximately 300, but I wasn't able to look under the financial impact to get a sense of what those 300 extra installations were going to cost.
Through Mayor Jarowski. So, and that's a good point, Councillor Whaley. It wasn't listed in particular, but I can tell you that it would be easily absorbed within our current meter exchange capital program. So we're not talking big money. I'm going to say 300 would cost us approximately $3,000, and that can be absorbed through our current meter exchange capital program.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think all the questions are done. Would anybody like to move the recommendation? Councillor Henry, Councillor Burke. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for running the pilot. There's another smart city application going on this year, Waterloo. Next up is Region of Waterloo Voice Radio Infrastructure Replacement, City of Waterloo User Gear. Welcome, Fire Chief Heptich.
Good afternoon, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, fellow city staff, members of our public and community partners. Not only on behalf of Fire Rescue Services am I happy to present this report to you, but I'm also presenting on behalf of 7 other divisions within the City of Waterloo, some of which are here this afternoon to help with any questions that may be arrived with the report as the presentation moves forward. Oops. So before I do begin, however, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the presentation. The first is to share with you the current state of the voice radio system in the region of Waterloo. Also address and share with you the project status since 2014, while identifying some of the radio users within the city of Waterloo. I want to share with you some of the benefits of a voice radio platform, or a common voice radio platform within the region of Waterloo that can now be accessed. And of course, we'll talk about financial implications and opportunities alongside next steps and recommendations. So with the first slide, with respect to the current state and user group, the voice radio system that emergency services and municipal enforcement services are using at the present date is owned by the region of Waterloo. In 2014, there was an extensive number of stakeholders that were called to the table to build a committee and prepare for the replacement of that aging infrastructure that requires complete replacement before the end of 2018. As I'd mentioned, the current users of the voice radio infrastructure in a region-wide context, all emergency services, excluding region of Waterloo paramedic services, utilize the system because the paramedic system operates on a provincial platform. Specific to the city of Waterloo, again, fire rescue services and municipal enforcement services utilize that system. The region of Waterloo, of course, owning the system, they leverage it for all of their voice radio communications. And there are other various municipal operations and departments from across the region that also use it, for example, for public works, roads, and other operations as they require. I did say at the beginning of the report that there are 6 other divisions that use mobile radio technology within the city of Waterloo. And now with the advancement of this particular project, there's an opportunity for other said divisions identified in the report to leverage this infrastructure and cooperative purchasing and preventive maintenance opportunities that, again, have been highlighted in the report. So the project status of the voice radio infrastructure replacement, the procurement process was completed in the spring of 2017. The successful company who was awarded the bid, if you will, was Motorola Solutions of Canada. And there has been extensive work completed by the stakeholders who have come to the table to discuss their voice radio needs and possible transition to this service that have been consulted. I highlight governance and committee recommendations. Along the way, as the project advanced, there was a need identified that a committee needs to be formed, a new committee, if you will, for governance and recommendations within the project of replacing the infrastructure itself. Throughout the process, it was identified that that committee is expected to be a recommendation later in 2017 to be a permanent fixture, if you will, to represent all stakeholders, not just emergency services, but various fleet agencies, water services, and so forth, to make decisions going forward. It's interesting to note and identified in the report that with the recommendation expected later in 2017, that this committee will have oversight of the complete voice radio infrastructure, and that is in parallel with the recommendation expected that the entire infrastructure of the voice radio infrastructure today will be transferred from the region of Waterloo to the Waterloo Regional Police Services and maintain oversight by the governance committee of various leadership within the region, including Waterloo Regional Police Services, all fire services in the region, and again, other stakeholders who use the system. In keeping with an update on the project status, it's now time to advance the discussion toward the purchase of user gear. User gear, by definition, is mobile radios, portable radios, and ancillary communication devices that are required for such communications. One of the parts and pieces of this is that there are, or have been, significant discounts negotiated by virtue of the cooperative purchasing opportunity among all stakeholders as part of the project status. So there are numerous benefits involved with not only migrating to but transitioning to in the city of Waterloo to a regional voice system, voice radio system. This is a long-term investment. It's highlighted by a minimum of a 15-year life expectancy to transition to this infrastructure. There are numerous enhanced life safety and operational benefits for all users with respect to. The system also complies with the Association of Public Safety Community Officials and their recommendations identified in what's called a P25 project for the enhancement of communications that, again, all stakeholders can leverage. There's also enhanced continuity and interoperable communications that can be leveraged as well. So this not only includes day-to-day operations among city staff and voice radio users, it also can be leveraged during localized or domestic incidents that may be contained within the city of Waterloo that all users can communicate. But there's also a significant region of Waterloo context that has been an ongoing conversation with the replacement of the voice radio that all stakeholders who have access to the voice radio system can communicate with one another across the region. And again, I highlight there's ongoing cooperative purchasing opportunities with the lifespan of this particular project, including preventive maintenance and repair of radios is built into this particular process. So the financial implications and opportunities, I'll start with the background first. It's important to note, as identified in the report, I again share that the current users are municipal enforcement services and fire rescue services. Until this date or the life of the current infrastructure, we have not paid operating or long-term capital costs for this particular system, including upgrades that have taken place along the way. If I can jump to the bottom bullet underneath the subtitle of operating and capital replacement, an operating cost estimate for all divisions within the city of Waterloo is estimated at $150,000 per year. This is a new pressure, save and accept a small operating budget that fire services currently has to address operating costs for our user gear, which is separate to the voice radio infrastructure as a whole. So I'm talking about towers and communication devices and so forth. With respect to capital, it's expected that the various divisions may report back to council during the next budget process to address the opportunity to pay for operating pressures, again, that are new and with respect to for that period of time. And that, will be referred to the 2019 budget process. If I go back up to the second bullet for capital, this particular project, if approved by council, will be funded from the Capital Reserve Fund. There's currently $2.5 million earmarked in 2017 and 2018 for this project. The estimated cost for all divisions is $1.2 million to $1.4 million. There is a projected surplus of $1.1 million to $1.3 million. And I note as well that there's a current budget line in the municipal enforcement services of $42,000 that will be returned to the Capital Reserve Fund as it will be funded out of the larger project for voice radio. With that said, upon council's approval, staff will look to advance and finalize the purchase of user gear. We'll also map user gear communications, train staff, and integrate equipment as required in 2018. We'll continue to work with the region of Waterloo on this project, emergency services and operations groups to advance the Voice Radio Governance Committee and so forth, through to working within and toward recommendations presented to council in this report. With that, I conclude with the formal presentation and welcome any questions you may have. And again, remind you that there are other members of the divisions represented in this report that can assist with answers as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. First up, Councillor Whaley.
Good report, Chief. Thank you very much. Earlier on another issue, I talked about this relentless march of technology. And we see it in communications probably in the region of Waterloo more than anything else. From landlines to pagers to cell phones to who even knows what's next. It all happens in a blink of an eye. And it creates obsolescence in older technologies. My question to you is, has there been any consideration given to, rather than buying the user gear, leasing the user gear, so as technology rapidly changes, just like we do with our cell phone policy here in Waterloo, we upgrade?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Whaley, So in the overall project, I can tell you that the project has entirely focused on the replacement of the voice radio infrastructure. And that starts with, if I can speak through the lens of emergency services, is that communications and reliable communications through two-way radios is essential and critical to the operations therein. In the day-to-day operations of other divisions that are not under emergency services, they too use two-way radios for their day-to-day communications as well. And again, with the overall and overarching piece of interoperability is the phrase that is commonly identified through all stakeholders. This again is seen as an opportunity to bring those users onto this system to leverage during times of emergencies and disasters and so forth, when other infrastructure may be inoperable, inaccessible, or otherwise. So specific to this particular project, I'm not privy to understanding if there was a move to go with another system or another means of system to communicate, because at the forefront of this and the requirement again is to have this two-way system to operate and to look at and to be owned as an asset within the region. You're welcome.
Further questions for the chief? So the way I see it is that we're able to buy this system. It's going to be about half of the budgeted cost, so we're going to have enormous savings, and we're going to have a common system for all 8 of our divisions that have communications needs going forward, and we'll do this before the system sunsets in next year.
That's correct, Mayor Jaworski.
Awesome, thank you. Questions? We'll move this, saving $1.25 million. Councillor Durrell, Councillor Freeman, all those in favor? Any opposed? Oh, 4, right? 4. All for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Getting to the end. Moving along. We have regional correspondence there for people to read. Any comments or questions on that? Seeing none? Oh, yeah. Under new business, we had a delegation, but she was able to get her 3 questions answered by staff earlier this afternoon and will not be attending. Under other business, I'm going to let you go, Councillor Burke.
Yes. Just a little shout out to the Parks Department, because there is a 101-year-old woman named Elvina who lives in a nursing home in Waterloo and is once a week is visited by the therapy dog that lets us live with her. And a few months ago, she was talking about how she liked to sit outside on a city park bench, not too far from her home, and just kind of enjoy the day. But she couldn't because the garbage cans were always in the wrong spot. So she asked, because she's very well informed and knows everyone's name who sits on council, she asked if I could possibly say something to the Parks Department. So I did, and they very nicely went out, had a look, made a plan for this spring to get the benches in the right place so this lady could go out and simply enjoy what she wanted to enjoy. And so the last time our dog Ruby was in visiting her, she gave Ruby an envelope to bring into the Parks Department, which was just a very, very simple thank you. So it's so nice that our Parks Department would take the time for somebody who is 101 years old and still enjoys getting outside and sitting on our park benches. So thanks to the Parks Department, excellent job, and we need to hear more about that.
Thank you. Congratulations, Commissioner Dykstra.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Burke, I know that the letter came through and staff appreciated that, so it was well received, and we aim to please where we can and try to help out the citizens of Waterloo. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Further items before I have one left. And it's entitled International City Management Association Executive Board Appointment, Tim Anderson. So I have a letter here from them. I'm pleased to inform you that Tim Anderson has been elected as a Regional Vice President on the International City and County Management Association. Founded in 1914, ICMA is the premier local government leadership and management organization. Its mission is to create excellence in local governance by advocating and developing professional management of local government worldwide. In addition to supporting over 11,000 members, ICMA provides publication data, lots of other things, to thousands of city and town experts throughout the world. Tim will be serving as one of 21 members of the ICMA Executive Board and is one of the highest honors that a member of local government management profession can receive. It is a significant career achievement, tremendous expression and confidence in Tim by his peers, and this is signed by the Executive Director, Mark Ott, of ICMA. And more importantly, ICMA pays the expenses for board member attendance at organizations. So congratulations, Tim. Thank you very much. Anything to say?
Thanks, Mayor Jaworski, for those remarks. No, it's a great honor to represent Waterloo and CAMA, the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, who put forward their international representative as myself. I had the opportunity to attend the first board meeting orientation last Friday in Washington, and it is a tremendous honor. It's a very large organization, and I hope to bring back a lot more best practices for cities like ourselves and keep moving forward. And again, I just want to say thank you to the Mayor and Council for your support, and my CMT colleagues as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Congratulations. Next up, we have enactment of bylaws per Councillor Freeman. We're going to be removing F, so we're moving bylaws A, B, C, D, E, G. I'd like to move them. Councillor Freeman, Councillor Henry. All those in favor? Councillor Freeman will now not vote. Bylaw number F, moved by Councillor Whaley, Councillor Veith. All those in favor? That's all of us, save for Councillor Freeman. Motion to go in closed session. Councillor Burke, Councillor Henry, all those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you all.